So, 2020.
Just stay positive for this video, George.
Huh. Okay, yeah, 2020 was so bad that I made two 20-minute plus videos just about surviving the damn year, with another one coming soon. And also recorded a dramatic reading of a Poe story fueled by nothing but pure concentrated catharsis. It feels like I recorded that reading ages ago, even though it was only back in October. Even the flow of time has been convoluted, truly making 2020 the Dark Souls of years. And yes, at X Meets Dark Souls, you can quote me on that. I am too tired to care if my writing is cliched for this video. One upside of being locked down inside and losing a job, though, is that I got to spend a lot of time playing video games. A lot of them were new, flashy 2020 releases, and a lot of them were also older games that I'd always wanted to play but never got around to. If you've been around since 2019, you'll know that I wanted to do another great backlog offensive for 2020, and just stick around, because I'm going to talk about that after the traditional top 10 gobbledygook. Outside of that, as mentioned earlier, if 2020 gave me nothing else, it gave me time to play a lot of DQP really wants to play that someday games. I finally got to experience Halo now that it finally came to a non-Xbox platform via Steam. I sat down and finished Ori and the Blind Forest at long last after 5 years of not getting back around to it. I speared a long-time video gaming white whale of mine by finishing Paper Mario Color Splash, a mere month before Origami King came along and wrecked any plans I had of making a video bad-mouthing it.
I'll chase it round Fort Cobalt and round the Emerald Circus and round Perdition's flames before I give it up.
And yes, I finished Death Stranding, the 2020 game of the year that didn't actually originally come out in 2020. As frustrated as I am at the writer's fundamental misunderstanding of asexuality, it wasn't enough to tarnish what wound up being one of the best surprises I played all year. I did not expect to find myself as absorbed in Death Stranding as I wound up being when it came to PC. Its relatively slow pace was a much-needed break from a lot of what was happening in my life at the time, and it helped me grieve more than a few personal things this summer. Of course, I also played some of 2020's games as well, and in spite of the pandemic, there were a lot. Hyrule Warriors Age of Calamity got to be my first Musou game, and it probably won't be the last one. Yes, Your Grace was an interesting Game of Thrones-y spin on Papers, Please's design. Melody of Memory was a fun enough way to fly through a bunch of really good video game music and also let it go. And Ghost Runner. Ghost Runner didn't really grab me, which is unfortunate. You'd think a first-person Katana Zero with wall running would be right up my alley, but for one reason or another, I just wasn't feeling it. My personal experience with 2020 was defined as much by the video games I played as it was by the overwhelming grief of losing family, work, hobbies, old ways of life, and financial security. And hey, if I were counting down the overwhelming grief of losing family, work, hobbies, old ways of life, and financial security, I'd be here all day, so let's talk about DQP's top 10 video games of 2020. Yeah. God, I'm so over 2020. Oh, and as usual, I didn't get to play every single game in 2020, so if your favorite's not on here, that's why. Sorry, Ghost of Tsushima, Last of Us Part 2, Tony Hawk, Flight Simulator, and basically every big next-gen game because the PlayStation 5 is only available to robots, apparently. Number 10. Among Us. We're starting off already with a bit of an anomaly. Among Us technically did not come out in 2020, but it rose to such cultural prominence this year that even the Game Awards counted it, so I may as well. Among Us is weird for me to talk about. I am not great with social deduction, mafia, or werewolf-style games. I tend to have difficulties with social skills and reading people, especially when they're intentionally trying to throw me off, while being good at it. However, I think that Among Us's sudden rise in popularity isn't without reason. It's an easy game to play online while stuck indoors. It's accessible and has crossplay across all of its different ports. It has an appealing art direction, and a lot of its quirks do make the deduction aspect of the game easier. Adding chores to the formula does a lot to help the game both be understandable and also supply some pretty wicked depth. It provides alibis, distractions, and misdirections, drawing players' attention away from the actual killers and giving them reasons to go into uncomfortably isolated spaces, as well as reasons to dodge suspicion. trying to suss out killers is tense and juicy fun, though the emotional exhaustion of it does make it less impactful on my end, personally speaking. But still, this game was impossible to ignore this year, and I think that's for good reason. Number 9. Doom Eternal. Yup, murdering demons is still as much of an adrenaline rush as it was in 2016. Only Doom could trick my Fitbit into thinking that sitting down to play a computer game is a cardio workout. Whether this game was superior to its predecessor has been something of a talking point on Twitter and elsewhere, even though reviews have been consistently high. If I can lay my honest opinion down though, I thought that while it may not be as consistent as Doom 2016, I love its weirder design aspects. The Marauder took a while to grow on me, but they did grow on me by the time the endgame rolled around. I love that this game is a bit more committed to making its maps big old Doom-like mazes. I appreciate that the artistic direction is more varied this time, with giant flesh nests, ruined cities with humorous demonic PSAs, big Nordic castles, and even a Colosseum at one point. Also, I love the meat hook. I love flying around maps, setting big monsters on fire and blasting them in the face. It's so much fun. A lot of Doom Eternal's changes from its predecessor are subjective in quality, but at the end of the day, it's still modern Doom, and modern Doom is still a hell of a good time. Pun absolutely intended. I'm not sorry, I warned you. I'm not giving this a pass-through for cliches. Number 8. Murder by Numbers. Picross meets Phoenix Wright was already going to be a slam dunk for me, even if the Picross kind of outweighs the Phoenix Wright in this scenario. The game is relatively light on actual detective work and relatively heavy on these Picross puzzles, but I like Picross puzzles, so ha! The trailers made it evident going in, but it still felt like a really pleasant surprise that Murder by Numbers has, a plot? And I know that's a weird thing to praise about a video game, but Picross games don't normally have plot? And it's good plot too? It's a genuinely interesting blend of science fiction with detective drama, with the robotic deuteragonist confronting deeply hidden implications about their creation and existence, all while assimilating themselves into a loving human community, all while contrasting their own pop cultural understanding of detective fiction with what detective work tends to actually be like. And may I remind you that this is a Picross game. I was expecting a fun mashup of two types of game that I like, and I wound up playing an emotionally authentic sci-fi drama. It really surprised me. So yeah, it's good. If you like this kind of thing, you should give it a shot. Wait, this was made by the Fall Guys dev team? Number 7. Animal Crossing: New Horizons. And thus we arrive at the Big Kahuna, the leader of the trifecta of games DQP played as he realized that this pandemic was going to leave a long-lasting traumatic impact on the world's collective consciousness. Rolls right off the tongue, really. Remember the Doom and Animal Crossing memes? They feel like they're from a bygone optimistic era. Animal Crossing: New Horizons is probably the game of the year on a more objective level. That or Among Us. People who stayed indoors because of the pandemic now conveniently had an outlet to relax, go on vacation, visit friends' homes, and generally goof off together. Its online features were pretty bare bones, and the infrastructure sometimes buckles under its own weight, and it can be almost user-unfriendly as the game starts out. And I'm not normally one to enjoy repetitive daily games like this, but I just can't stay mad at Animal Crossing, not this year. I got to hang with friends and go on dates with this game. I got to show off fashion styles and be a home decor expert. I got to be an art connoisseur whenever Red actually bothered to show his face. Others got to celebrate birthdays, weddings, and graduations through this game. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris even campaigned with this game before Nintendo brought the hammer down. New Horizons became a vessel with which to at least act out what the pandemic robbed from us as a society. And though it may not be as compelling as a game, it's impossible to ignore what it did on a cultural level. Okay, so I know I have these next two games listed as number 6 and number 5, but they're more tied than they are really ranked better or worse than each other, because they both semi-clumsily do a similar thematic thing in really cool subtextual ways, and I admire them both a lot. One of them is a lot more popular and profitable than the other, but you should give them both a try if you haven't already. Okay, number 6. 13 Sentinels: Aegis Rim. Another aspect of our culture that COVID has absolutely decimated is the nerd pop culture tentpole blockbuster. bear with me, I'm going to tie this back into 13 Sentinels in a bit, but there were no Marvel movies this year. No Star Wars, save a decent live-action series and a Clone Wars final season that, while incredible, is admittedly far from mainstream. And to be honest, it was kinda nice. Nice not to be stuck in the perpetual Marvel hype cycle, not to have to go to the existential advertising hellscape that is the modern theater chain, not to have my ears blasted out by sound systems cranked as high as they can legally go, not to feel like my nostalgia is being laser targeted and psychologically exploited, not to have to pay upwards of $90 to ensure my entire Star Wars loving family gets assigned seats together to watch the latest movie in one go, not including popcorn. Don't get me wrong, the movie-going experience is wonderful as a whole, but there are aspects of big cinema business that I don't really miss. The only big superhero movie we got this year, technically speaking, literally only came out weeks ago on a streaming service, and it was alright. A bit yikes on the whole sexual consent thing, though. And like Animal Crossing before it, it is into this relative void that 13 Sentinels entered the American game market at an unintentionally convenient time, if a little late. Just as American nerd pop culture wound into a possibly temporary decline, 13 Sentinels arrived with a story that made me question my own relationship with this kind of entertainment. Without getting too deep into spoiler territory, it relies on many, many nerd pop culture tropes. Giant mechs, kaiju, time travel, and literal Terminators. But it also uses those tropes to really explore how weird and complicated and sometimes even insidious our relationship with pop sci-fi and fantasy can be. And the companies that produce them. It's kind of like an anti-Ready Player One. And it was eye-opening to play something like this in a year where not only were there almost no big blockbuster movies, but we also saw fans go nuclear over games like The Last of Us 2 or Cyberpunk. Maybe just, take a break, guys? Maybe don't send death threats to developers or defend crunch culture? Here, sit back, relax. I have this great tape you should watch. Number 5. Final Fantasy VII Remake. I'm not going to spend too long talking about Final Fantasy VII Remake here for a couple reasons. 1, I've already made a video about its world design. 2, there's not a lot I can say regarding this game's themes without talking about the ending. And I personally know quite a few viewers who have not gotten to that point yet. However, like 13 Sentinels, Final Fantasy VII Remake is another game that made me re-examine my own relationship with popular media. Remake has a lot to say subtextually about fan expectations and the kind of comfortable, profitable nostalgia that led to this game being remade in the first place. It doesn't get there without some of that trademark Tetsuya Nomura weirdness, and I'm not going to deny that there are some pretty big problems regarding the story's accessibility to Final Fantasy VII newcomers, especially in the late game. I do admittedly put a lot of value on subtext when I talk about entertainment, and that sometimes leads me to look past a lot of flaws and weirdness in the text itself. I wouldn't be this neck deep into Kingdom Hearts if that wasn't the case. Much of the praise I have for this game has to do with context for its development, its franchise's history, and the cultural impact that the original made in the mid-90s. Not everyone has that context, and I understand why a lot of people felt alienated by this game. I can't exactly blame them. However, I admire the game for intentionally trying to make players think critically about their own nostalgia, even if it predictably backfired for many fans. Final Fantasy VII Remake didn't have to be as weird and out there as it was to sell well, but by Bahamut it went there, and I'm glad it did. Here's hoping Part 2 can keep the train rolling. Number 4. Necrobarista. Now we're getting to the real 2020 shit. Necrobarista is a short, stylish visual novel about the terrifying reality of saying goodbye to a loved one. That terror applies in-game to both the character on the receiving end of death and the characters watching it happen. I can say for sure that the game nails how it feels to watch this happen because less than a month before it came out, I lost my grandfather. It wasn't a particularly drawn-out death, but I had to watch it from a distance of several thousand miles. I was still working 2 jobs at the time, so I couldn't afford the time or the money to travel and say goodbye to him. Because of the pandemic, my family is still waiting to hold a proper memorial service for him. And mine is far from the only story like this in 2020. There were, at the very least, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of Americans in this position. If you're wondering why I didn't play The Last of Us 2 this year after making a big favorite games essay about the first one more than a year ago, it's literally because a friend DM'd me right before it came out and flat out warned me that I was not in the right place for it, because of this real familial grief that I was going through. And I'm still not in the right place for it. I don't know if I'll ever be, because after losing my grandfather, I didn't want revenge. I fucking wanted warmth. And Necrobarista is that. It's a warm, cozy, and empathetic game about losing a loved one. It doesn't talk down, it doesn't downplay the tragedy or the misery or the grief of it. It explores the scariness and the sadness by being warm and cozy about it. It understands that someone who is grieving doesn't need anger or violence, they need empathy. A lot of writers have stated that video games provided an outlet for escape this year, but I don't think that does this medium justice. Necrobarista, along with the next game on this list, genuinely helped me process my grief this year. Not by escaping from it, but by going deeper and exploring it in sometimes funny, sometimes heartbreaking, but always warm ways. And in a year like 2020, I value that a hell of a lot more than any violent quadruple A game with the most crunch-tacular graphics money can buy. Number 3. Paper Mario: The Origami King. As tempting as it is to say, Paper Mario's back, baby, I admittedly almost said this back in my video on Origami King, this game still has more in common design-wise with its two predecessors than it does with Thousand Year Door or the original. And that's okay. Origami King was good enough on its own to convince me that it didn't need to be like Thousand Year Door. Origami King explored themes of loss, individualism, and familial turmoil in ways that only itself could do, without needing to harken back to the design of older games or please longtime fans. It stands on its own. I mean, if you had told me at the beginning of the year that I would be making a 20+ minute video about the philosophy of a new Paper Mario game, I'd have told you were losing your mind. But here we are, Paper Mario by way of John Locke. Like Necrobarista, Origami King came at a time when I was still grieving a loss in the family, and also an impending loss of work. Its portrayal of characters like Bobby and Olivia felt honest and moving and sincere, and its philosophical themes of conscious individuality worked in service of those character arcs just as much as the characters worked for them. It took me by surprise. It was, on the surface, an unassuming follow-up to two games that I disliked, and by the end it moved me to tears by its own merit, and not by the expectations that I had for the franchise's current direction. Which is almost exactly what I praised this series for a few years ago. Origami King did not need to go this hard, but it did. I'm overcome with joy that it did. If you're a Switch owner who wants to play something warm and fuzzy while still processing the trauma and the pain of 2020, I can't think of a better way to spend 30 hours or so. Well, I mean, the next two games are also great and also on Switch, but still, don't sleep on Origami King. It's phenomenal. Number 2. Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Will of the Wisps is not on here for being about COVID, like probably too many of these games are. It's on here by the merit of just being a really, 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 really good Metroidvania. It's a very atmospheric and very pretty Metroidvania. I like those a lot. Longtime viewers of this channel probably remember that I had at one point started Ori and the Blind Forest, but that it did not really grab me at the time it came out. Sitting down to finally finish it in preparation for the sequel, I regret not getting back to it earlier. I think that it's just kind of okay as a Metroidvania, but as the game went on, I fell in love with the fast, tight platforming. There was a great foundation there for a sequel, and I had hoped that Will of the Wisps would flesh out what was there. I didn't think it would blow away my expectations like it ended up doing. Will of the Wisps' world is dense and alluring to explore. It's full of interesting and fun characters, and it puts more weight on a sense of whimsy that I think was relatively lacking in Blind Forest, though it still knows how to craft a story that is simultaneously heartwarming and also heartbreakingly tragic at points. The platforming is as strong as ever, and there are lots of abilities that make it insanely fun to move around the world. Combat was completely overhauled to be closer to something like Hollow Knight, which is a positive in my book. And it did all this while still maintaining the platforming flow, still keeping the great escape sequences, and still having a mysterious and sometimes dark atmosphere. It doesn't leave that much room for a sequel at the end, but if Moon Studios keeps this up, I cannot wait to see what they have in store for the future, however distant it may be. Apparently they're working on a new action RPG next? Oh, and speaking of action RPGs. Number 1. Yep, it's gotta be Hades. I'm gonna join the rest of the Greek choir with this one. Hades knocked it out of the damn park, and I don't think it's an exaggeration to call this Supergiant's best work yet. Hades took a genre that I'm not normally big on, roguelikes or roguelites or whatever people are supposed to call them nowadays, and made it palatable by virtue of every death adding something to the story. The entire game is about this Sisyphusian struggle to escape the land of the dead, and reinforces that theme by using roguelite mechanics like, well, being a really hard game that makes you die over and over. The writing is also incredible, using the characters in the Greek pantheon to explore these ideas both during and in between runs. It's a playable exploration of why we keep pushing through this existential crisis that we call life. And in a year with as much wanton suffering as 2020, that's the kind of game that resonates with people. Its writing and mechanics made me want to keep pushing and see the game's end, if it can be called that. I've heard from roguelike fans that it's not necessarily as deep or content-rich as many other roguelikes out there, like Spelunky or Dead Cells, but I'm not a roguelike fan, and I'm already biased towards Supergiant's previous work, so there you go. Like Bastion, Pyre, and DQP Game of the Year alumnus Transistor before it, it's very pretty to look at, gorgeous to listen to, and genuinely moving to experience as a story of existentialism and love. And I think after a year like this, we could all use a story about existentialism and love. Oh, and the character designs are, they're very good.
Alright, now that we've gushed about Hades, it's time for some channel upkeep.
First order of business is the Great Backlog Offensive. 10,000 years ago, back in the March of 2019, I announced that I was bringing the old Great Backlog Offensive miniseries back for 2020. And I barely failed. For those who don't know what a Great Backlog Offensive is, what happens is I pick 10 supposedly classic games that I've never played before, and I play and analyze them from a modern perspective.
Like, you know those games that you buy on sale because you're like, oh, I've heard really good things about that game, I'll play that someday, and then you never do? Yeah, those games. Hence, Great Backlog Offensive.
Back in 2015, I made a big video out of each game, complete with live reactions, an after-action report, and sometimes even a guest. I will not be doing that for this set of games. Instead, I'm going to make another top 10 list ranking them here in this video. For reference, in order of when I played them, the games are Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare, Final Fantasy IX, Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time, Shenmue, Yakuza 0, Resident Evil Remake, Shadow Complex, Okami, Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines, and I dropped Divinity Original Sin 2 after allegations of sexual assault regarding writer Chris Avellone came forward, and I replaced it with Disco Elysium. In addition to the top 10 list that I'm about to start, I am still going to produce videos for 6 of these, though I won't necessarily be applying the Great Backlog Offensive branding to them. I did write videos for the 4 others, but looking back at them, I decided that I wasn't really satisfied with how they turned out. Either the games just weren't for me, or I just didn't have anything really interesting to say about them that could be explored in a DQP-length video. In addition to these videos, I've made a New Year's resolution that I want to make more of them. I played a lot of games in 2020, and with all those games comes a lot of opinions to write about, and a lot of footage that's just sitting on my hard drive. I know I say this every year, and it rarely pans out how I like, but I really want to make an earnest attempt to make 2021 a better year for content on this channel. There will, at the very least, be more videos than I've published in 2020 and 2019 combined. That's not a high bar, but I will still sail over it. I promise you that. Okay, Great Backlog Offensive 2020. Let's go. Number 10. Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. It was in this offensive that I learned that Call of Duty is not for me and never really was. As someone who only owned a Wii as their primary console in high school, back when Call of Duty was beginning its conquest of the entire video game industry, I was addicted to the Wii remake of GoldenEye 007, in particular its online multiplayer, which was not unlike Call of Duty. Outside of that, I did not experience the 2007 to 2014-ish cultural zeitgeist that was the modern military shooter. At that age, I was also really unnerved at the popularity of a genre of games that glorified the military, their equipment, and the invasion of foreign soil in the name of stopping terrorism. I was also a dumb teen who didn't realize the irony of enjoying a James Bond game even though James Bond still does a lot of those things consistently. Even if I didn't really experience the genre, I felt its effects, of course. Games like Call of Duty were popular enough in high school that I was sometimes made fun of for playing less mature video games. A lot of my high school game diet consisted of the Wii's greatest hits, and not much else. Games that were brand new after I left high school felt simplified and marketed to a Call of Duty consuming crowd. Its influence was felt in everything from BioShock Infinite to Mass Effect 2 and 3. Sitting down to finally play the campaign of Call of Duty 4 confirmed to me that I am still uncomfortable with a lot of this. I appreciate that the campaign occasionally takes its time and its slower moments to show how horrific warfare can be, especially in the nuke and the all gillied up scenes. But I can't help but feel unnerved at a lot of other moments that are hard to tell whether they're supposed to be deconstructive or celebratory. Also, what the hell are loot boxes doing in the remaster? Number 9. Shadow Complex. A common running theme among the 10 games I played here is that they've shown how far video gaming has come. This is usually a good thing. Oftentimes, I'd play a game like Bloodlines or Shenmue and think, wow, what a fascinating piece of evolutionary history. It's interesting to see how Bloodlines got to New Vegas, got to Outer Worlds, or how Shenmue subtly influenced many different games and offered a unique look at gaming's future that's not altogether inaccurate. The primary problem I had with Shadow Complex, in addition to being based on the work of a widely known and infamous homophobe, is that I had played Ori and the Will-o'-the-Wisps pretty shortly after playing this. And also that I had replayed Super Metroid pretty recently. And also that I had played Hollow Knight not too long before that. I don't doubt that Shadow Complex is a landmark game. It and Cave Story acted as sort of heralds of a Metroidvania boom by way of independent developers. It demonstrated the appeal of the genre to Xbox Live Arcade players back when digital-only indie games were starting to really proliferate. Without Shadow Complex, I'm sure a lot fewer developers would have looked at Metroidvanias in the early 2010s and thought, whoa, people like this, I could make something like this. And I do like some of the ideas on display here. There's one bit I really liked where rather than unlocking the path forward with a new ability, you unlock it by flooding an existing area and recontextualizing it that way. That's genuinely cool. But as a whole, it really don't hold up, especially since it's soft-locked during the final boss for me. In the remaster, that's a yikes. Number 8. Prince of Persia: The Sands of Time. I cannot bring this game up in good faith without first mentioning the giant nuclear explosion of a scandal that happened at Ubisoft this year. Many people came forward with stories of an abusive culture of misogyny and sometimes outright sexual assault, and many members of that leadership are still in positions that allow them to profit from Ubisoft's output. Like, I don't even feel comfortable giving Ubisoft the publicity, let alone praise of a game that they made 17 years ago. And like, it's a fine game, don't get me wrong, but reconciling what Sands of Time did with the revelations of what this company was really like, gave me awful feelings in my stomach. The revelations of this year made Sands of Time's narrative accomplishments feel like a twisted parody of itself. A lot of heart went into Sands of Time. It's a pretty fun puzzle platformer, even if the combat kinda feels like an afterthought. And the story feels genuinely subversive for its time, considering a lot of the tropes that were still commonplace in the mid-2000s. But after hearing the stories about Ubisoft this year, what does that subversion matter? Like, okay, if Sands of Time is one of your favorite games and you're excited for the upcoming remake, I cannot stop you from buying and playing it. Nobody is stopping you from enjoying Ubisoft's work. I just ask that you remember what they did to those people, and what kind of work environment they fostered to make these games. I'll go more in depth about the game itself in that video, but for now, that's the single largest sticking point in my brain about this game. And I'm moving on. Number 7. Shenmue. Shenmue is such a cool game. Like, it isn't good, but it is so cool. Playing it for the first time, it reminded me a lot of War Inspector's one city block design aspiration. I'll get more into it in my upcoming video on the game, but the idea of that design dream is that he'd create a game that takes place in just one city block, and he would just over-design the hell out of that city block. Fill it with characters, schedules, just make that city block alive. Shenmue appeals to that design philosophy a lot. Compared to other games of the time, it bustles with activity. You can creepily stalk NPCs and learn all of their habits. Stores open and close at set times. You have a daily allowance and are free to follow the game's plot at your own pace. One of my favorite quirks of this game, on paper at least, is that because everyone operates at a set schedule and because time is a linear construct, you're not always able to immediately talk to someone to progress the story. This forces you to find ways to kill time, which naturally funnels you into the side content. That's a really clever way to get players to do the extraneous, unnecessary stuff in the game. It'd be a lot cooler if that stuff wasn't just hang on, gotcha capsules, drinking soda, and a virtual fighter training mode, but still, it's a cool idea. I feel bad for Shenmue. A lot of this game crumples under its own weight. Many of the disparate mechanics don't work well together. The Dreamcast is trying its damnedest to run this game, and even playing the remastered version, it's clear that the Dreamcast just couldn't hack it back then. But Shenmue walked so other games like Yakuza and Disco Elysium could run, and I'm proud of that, at the very least. Shenmue may not be a good game on its own, but as an evolutionary curiosity, it is fascinating. Number 6. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. I have a lot of complicated feelings about Bloodlines, and about its forthcoming sequel for that matter. Like Shenmue, Bloodlines has a lot of insanely cool ideas. Its tutorial made the game out to be, from a modern lens, the combat from Deus Ex, combined with the dialogue and political systems from Fallout New Vegas, all with vampire powers and satirically sharp writing. This sounds like exactly my jam. Unfortunately, the Source engine just can't handle it. It is glaringly obvious that this game had a hellish, crunch-filled development cycle, with a bunch of different ideas and systems just not playing nice with each other, on an engine that wasn't even finished at the time of the development, and with mountains of cut content. The game came out glaringly unfinished, and despite years of mods trying to improve it, it remains a janky mess to this day. It also honestly has some serious problems with mental health stigmatization and objectifying nearly all of its female characters, which was sadly unsurprising to see in a game from 2004, but still. That stinks. It stinks to see that kind of thing happen to a game so ambitious and full of good ideas. But if there is a silver lining, it's that a lot of the games that have come from this game's alumni have been stellar, earnest corrections of a lot of these mistakes. Two of this game's lead designers went on to make The Outer Worlds, a game with more thoughtful diversity, funny writing, and far less bugs. It was good enough to be my game of the year last year. And for a time, it looked like Bloodlines 2 would also correct a lot of these mistakes. Many of the interviews and previews surrounding Bloodlines 2 suggested that Hardsuit Labs were taking a lot of these criticisms of the original to heart. But then it got delayed, and the two lead writers left the project. looks like this game's development cycle is still just as cursed as the original. Still though, Bloodlines had some neat ideas, and it filled me with this strange mix of optimism about how far games have come, if only with some pessimism for where the franchise at large is going. Number 5. Yakuza 0. Alright, now we're getting to the good half of the list, baby! Yakuza 0 is such a slam dunk of a video game. It's not as ambitious as something like, say, Bloodlines or Shenmue, but what it does well, it does so damn well. There are so many things to do in this game that it boggles my mind, and enough of the gameplay tangents are fully featured enough that they could be bespoke $5 App Store games if they really wanted to be. And a lot of the mini-games have quest lines and stories of their own, with humorous, quirky, and campy writing that I just adore. I'm not normally a quantity over quality kind of person, but Yakuza 0 nails that philosophy. It's a manageable but dense toy box that is stuffed full of things to do and quirky things to discover. Of course, since it does so many things at once, no single one of those things can be as deep as a game that's more focused on a single idea, but Yakuza 0 has an alluring mixed tone that wavers between goofball comedy and soap operatic drama so often that it feels like no other game I've played. I cannot wait to play more of these games. They are fantastic. And if you've evaded the Yakuza hype train for this long, 0 is the best place to start. That or Like a Dragon. I've heard really good things about Like a Dragon, but I didn't get around to it. Number 4. Okami. Okami is basically Shrek, but with Shinto folktales instead of Western fairy tales, and made by the folks who would go on to make stuff like Bayonetta and Nier Automata, and really, that should be enough to convince you to play it if you somehow haven't already. I could stop here, it's as great as that sounds. And if that just doesn't do it for you, then just look at this footage. This game came out 14 years ago on the PlayStation 2, and it is still one of the most gorgeous games I've ever seen. But okay, I'll make more of a concrete case for this game. Okami gamifies the idea of being a god. And I don't mean like in a god game like Populous or Dwarf Fortress or whatever. Like, you're playing as Amaterasu, spreading and sprouting life wherever you walk, replacing war-torn debris with forestation, and feeding the wildlife. The world bends to the will of your paintbrush. I know that saying Princess Mononoke Forest Spirit Simulator 2006 doesn't feel like it does it justice, but that's how it felt to me. I thought it was really neat. I also learned a lot about the source material by playing this game too. Playing this game inspired me to go digging and learn about a lot of these legends, and seeing how Okami plays with them proved to be really fascinating. The game turned out to be just as much of a classic as people remember it being. It's remarkably timeless. Oh, and one last thing, if you're looking for one version to play in particular, the Switch version has both touch controls and surprisingly fantastic HD Rumble support. It's very nice. Number 3. Final Fantasy IX. This one's my new favorite. I know I've only finished 6 and 7 and started a few others, so I'm not really qualified to say that one of them is my favorite, but this one's my new favorite. The reason that FF9 resonated for me is actually pretty personal, and I will go more in depth about that in my video on it. But one other aspect that I admired about this game was its sense of whimsy and nostalgic charm. That doesn't stop it from going into some pretty dark thematic places, but anyone who knows me knows that in-depth emotional exploration with a bit of family-friendly whimsy on the surface probably knows that, like Bloodlines, that is my jam. Final Fantasy IX has such a great sense of camaraderie and emotional authenticity. You get to know these characters like their family and support them while they support you in return. This contrasts with an antagonist who is narcissistic in the least subtle way possible to form a well-tread story where companionship holds the secret to saving the world. It's cliché, but clichés are clichés because they usually work, and Final Fantasy IX really works. Also, I'm sure you noticed this from the background track, but the music in this game is incredible. Uematsu may as well be wearing this giant sign over his shirt that just says, "Hey guys, I really, really like prog rock." I love it. Number 2. Resident Evil, the remake. Resident Evil is a fantastic game, but for the purposes of this project that I wanted to do, it's kind of awful. It is one of my favorite games in this roster, and it is also probably the one that I have the least to say anything new or meaningful about. As mentioned before, I tend to favor subtext when analyzing entertainment, and the subtext of Resident Evil consists of corporations bad and, don't do an outbreak? 2020 is a supremely awkward year to talk about this franchise. I don't think now is the time in history for a story about how a giant biotech pharmaceutical corporation is purposefully trying to utilize a deadly outbreak for their own profit. And I don't say that to defend private pharmaceutical companies. I'm saying that now is a time where we need to trust scientific advancements and push for as wide a public vaccination as possible so that we can get this pandemic behind us as soon as possible. But back to Resident Evil itself. This game, especially the remake that's currently available on digital storefronts, is a game that's aged so well. While the remastering of the original backgrounds may be a little imperfect, it still looks gorgeous for a 2002 game. This was another game that I played on Switch, and when playing on the Switch's small LCD, this game is absolutely astonishing. The map design, the enemy placements, the deliberation of each camera angle and background, this game's so good. It's a game with a remarkable sense of direction, even compared to many games today. If you're into Metroidvanias, or even if you just appreciate how, like, Zelda dungeons are laid out, Resident Evil is a spooky treat. And so is the second one. And so is the seventh one, for that matter. Number 1. Disco Elysium. I am not going to get into much detail about this game because it is going to be literally my next video. So all I will say is this. If any of the praise I had for Shenmue sounds appealing, this game pulls off a lot of what that game was trying to do in a much more cohesive fashion. There's a lot of reading, but hey, I like reading, and this game has humor, tension, and heart to spare. Unlike any of the games here, though, Disco Elysium opened my eyes to what RPGs could be. It doesn't have a combat system, and the entire game relies on dice rolls. It took a lot of effort to make this work, but it does, and I want more RPGs like it. Can you imagine what this genre can be like without having to rely on combat? Think of how many more things an RPG could be about. Disco Elysium's paving the way for those RPGs. Like, it's not gonna reinvent the genre, obviously. Conventional RPGs are still very profitable. But I hope people look at Disco Elysium and see that potential. There's a lot of it, and it is exciting. And that's 2020. It's easy to look back at my end of 2019 video and laugh at what I said at the end of it. The 2020s are going to be an unfathomably important decade, so let's make it the best 2020s we can. But earnestly, I think most of us are doing the best we can, given the circumstances. It's okay to be sad, depressed, grieving, anxious, or just exhausted after a year like this. It's okay to just be a restful slug for a bit. Heaven knows I was, or else I'd have more content. Here's to 2021. Take a breather, mourn what you lost, be good to each other, and keep wearing those masks. Yes, even after you get vaccinated.